Oh, you're going to be glad we're here at Zechariah chapter 3. Some more prophetic visions that Zechariah has that are more latter day in nature, basically, but some great things for us to think about. So let's jump in and get started here. Verse 1, and he showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him. So we see Joshua, and he's standing before the angel of the Lord. So there's an angel, and then there's Satan in here as well. So if we look at this, in fact, Guthrie and Motyer in their book New Bible Commentary said, most scholars agree that the Joshua referred to here was the high priest of the time. Remember, we've talked about him at the beginning of Zechariah and even in Haggai. But in typical prophetic fashion, there is a dualism in this chapter because Joshua in Hebrew is Yeshua, Greek Hee-ay-sous, English Jesus or Jesus, okay, was a type of Jesus Christ, the great high priest. The chapter is messianic, basically. So we can see this idea of this vision, and it's Joshua, the current priest, that's standing there. But Joshua, it's not literal about Joshua's life. This is more metaphorical about Joshua or somebody named Joshua. So if you think about it, actually, we call Jesus Jesus, but that's because we're looking at an English translation. If we looked at a different translation, we would be seeing Joshua, not Jesus. So important to think about, okay? So the current high priest, Joshua in Zechariah's time, is standing in metaphorically for Jesus Christ in this. So this is a messianic prophecy. Now, from the promises of a glorious future for the city and people of God, Zechariah turns to the means by which they are to be achieved. God will raise up a perfectly priestly mediator of whom Joshua and his fellow priests are a foreshadowing. So this is again reminding them, we have a Messiah coming. So verse 2, and the Lord said unto Satan, the Lord rebuke thee, O Satan, even the Lord that hath chosen Jerusalem rebuke thee. Is not this a brand plucked out of the fire? So interesting question. Very interesting question that comes up. So Satan means accuser. Okay, that's an important thing to think about. It's accuser. So this couldn't be this could be literally Satan. This could be metaphorically an accuser against Joshua, basically. So as they're standing before the Lord, or the angel of the Lord, as it says, this is an accuser against the high priests, possibly. So this is a vision of the priesthood against the accuser, okay, like a court case type situation. Satan came to condemn, but God pushes back against him. So God's going, you're bringing charges against him, but aren't you the one that's really guilty, Satan? All right, that's really what's happening here. So now if we look at this idea of, is not this a brand plucked out of the fire? Israel as a nation had been rescued from the furnace of Babylon to become a torch to enlighten the nations. That's Guthrie and Motyer talked about that in their New Bible Commentary. But what's interesting is they have been plucked out of the fire. So now they're coming out. They will have been bad, but they will be saved. So if you think about this scenario, this court case, this vision showing up as, the accuser is accusing the priesthood of being false, and the Lord is going, they were, but they've changed. They've repented, and you haven't, and so you're the one that's guilty. You need to go, Satan. They're changing. Verse 3, now Joshua was clothed with filthy garments and stood before the angel. So again, that's the symbol of sins, the sins of Israel, those filthy garments. And he answered and spake unto those that stood before him, saying, take away the filthy garments from him. And unto him he said, behold, I have caused thine iniquity to pass from thee, and I will clothe thee with the change of raiment. So Kyle and Delich said, Joshua is opposed by Satan, not on account of any personal offenses, either in his private or his domestic life, but in his official capacity as high priest, and for sins which were connected with his office, or for offenses which would involve the nation, though not as the bearer of the sins of the people before the Lord, but as laden with his own and his people's sins. The dirty clothes which he had on point to this. So realize this is a good thing from a leader standpoint. He's the high priest. It's his job to help correct the people, and it hasn't been working. So he's not doing his job as the high priest, and that's the challenge that's been happening. But because he says, this is the Lord speaking, I will take away their iniquity. They've repented. They have changed. I'm going to handle that for them. I'm going to pay the price for them, basically. And so I will clothe thee with the change of raiment. This is robes of righteousness. So that's an important thing for us to think about, a good distinction to have. Now, verse 5, and I said, let them set a fair mitre, which is a crown, upon his head. So would say, and it's going to say on it, basically, so they set a fair mitre on his head and clothed him with the garments, and the angel of the Lord stood by. It would say, holiness to the Lord on the crown. So he's got holy robes on and a crown on his head, basically. So he's now being prepared to be a king and a prince in Israel, if you think about it, basically. Verse 6, and the angel of the Lord protested unto Joshua, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, if thou wilt walk in my ways, and if thou wilt keep my charge, then thou shalt also judge my house, and shalt also keep my courts, and I will give thee places to walk among these that stand by. So basically, if you do what I ask of you, then you can be like the angels of heaven. You can be blessed and be taken care of, and you can judge my people and do these things. Verse 8, hear now, O Joshua the high priest, thou and thy fellows that sit before thee, for they are men wondered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant, the branch. If you notice, branch is all capitalized. Okay, very important to look at this. This is Carrie Molson, in fact, recognizing the everlasting covenant in the scriptures, had this to say about this verse here. He said, a series of prophets played off each other in speaking of rulership, which, when combined with understanding that this was part of the covenant, adds a new depth of understanding. Isaiah spoke of a branch coming from Jesse. Since David was Jesse's son, this is a clear promise of a future Davidic ruler. Jeremiah expanded on this imagery, speaking of the Lord raising up to David a righteous branch, and a king shall reign and prosper. It's in Jeremiah chapter 23. Jeremiah then prophesied that during the days of this king, Judah would be saved and dwell safely, and people would begin to say that the greatest work of the Lord was gathering scattered Israel. Jeremiah prophesied of these same things again several chapters later in Jeremiah 33, adding that David would never lack a man to sit on the throne. This is a surprising prophecy, since Jeremiah had already prophesied that Judah would fall and lose its king, and he prophesied of it again soon thereafter, Jeremiah 34. Understanding that rulership is part of the Abrahamic covenant allows us to see that this prophecy is less about specific kings staying on the throne and more about the fact that God would eventually bring about all the promises of the covenant. Recognizing this allows us to see that Zechariah was promising the same thing when he redeployed Jeremiah's prophecy by saying, I will bring forth my servant, the branch. Thus, Zechariah was also teaching that the promises of the covenant were about to be realized again. So the branch is a person, which is, of course, Jesus Christ. He will come and save the people. So verse 9, for behold, the stone that I have laid before Judah, and upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the graving thereof, and the Lord of hosts, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall ye call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree. So if you're under the vine and under the fig tree, you are in shade. You are in protection. A stone shall be 7 eyes. That's the ability to see and understand and do things. And so we could see a stone almost like a seer stone, a stone that can see everything, basically. and there be an engraving on the stone, like a name on that seer stone, basically, and all the iniquity removed from the land. How do you remove iniquity? You understand it, you expose it. The seer stone exposes it. It turns into it's all gone, and then everybody's under the protection of the fig tree or the vine. Who's the vine or the fig tree? The branch? Jesus Christ, basically. So great, powerful metaphor of the last days, the second coming of Christ, what he's going to do, how that's going to work out. I like the idea of the garments. This is important to think about. Okay, if you've ever been to an LDS temple, watch our videos. We have a whole video course on that. This is talking about it, initiatory and endowment opportunities, putting on a garment, crown, preparing you to be a king and a priest unto the Most High God, basically. That's temple imagery right there. Going to the temple is going to help you to be prepared for what's coming, basically. So really important for us to look at. And garments are in there as well. Putting on holy clothing to help us, to remind us of what we're doing is great. So let's jump over to the next chapter in Zechariah as we continue forward.